Today's reading comes from Mark's Gospel, and it's chapter 9 and verses 2 to 9. And it's the event we call the Transfiguration, something that's told in Matthew and Luke's Gospel also. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain, where they were alone. As they looked on, a change came over Jesus, and his clothes became shining white, whiter than anything in the world could wash them. Then the 3 disciples saw Elijah and Moses talking with Jesus. Peter spoke up and said to Jesus, "Teacher, how good it is that we are here. We will make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He and the others were so frightened that they didn't know what to say. Then a cloud appeared and covered them with its shadow, and a voice came from the cloud, "This is my own dear son. Listen to him." They took a quick look around, but didn't see anyone else. Only Jesus was with them. As they came down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has risen from death." So, as I say, it's an event that's told in the other 2 Gospels. The fact that Mark starts this reading with the words 6 days later, which is very rare in Mark's Gospel to tie things down to a time frame, shows that he wants to tie this event to the previous events in his Gospel. And what were they? Well, we have Peter's famous declaration about Jesus, when in that heart-stopping moment, Jesus turns to the disciples and say, "Well, that's fine, what everybody else says. What do you say about me? Who do you think I am?" And Peter makes that declaration, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus again says, like at the end of this reading, "Don't tell anyone about me." Having come to that spiritual enlightenment, having got that insight, Jesus then feels he can trust the disciples with the true nature of his mission and his ministry, why he came on earth as God in human form. He tells them that he's going to go and be put to death. In verse 32 of chapter 8, he made this very clear to them. But of course, Peter won't have any of it through an act of denial, an act of love, an act of repulsion. How can this possibly happen to this wonderful, wonderful person? But Jesus says to them afterwards, "If anyone wants to come with me, he must forget himself, carry his cross, and follow me." It's a bit like the Great Commandment. If anyone's going to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, they need to put God at the centre of everything they are, say, and do. It's no good having your own agenda, because to be in the presence of God is to be so completely awestruck that everything else falls away, that one's heart is so filled with love that there's nothing else one can do except follow and serve and look at the world around us with such joy and love and try and serve all people without reserve and without any prejudice. This is what's the message of the good news and what is so relevant for us today. But of course, in this particular reading, there's so much symbolism and there's so much meaning to the whole idea. So we've had Peter's declaration, we've had Jesus saying, "Well, you've really got to forget yourself and follow me." And then we have the Transfiguration, which, just like Jesus' baptism, is another occasion in Mark's Gospel when heavens are, in the baptism story, torn apart and God is revealed. And here, in spite of the disciples feeling very down at being rebuked, at them saying, no, your death can never happen, here we have an affirmation from God, from heaven, of who Jesus is. "This is my own dear son. Listen to him." And so anyway, we have this experience. They go up a mountain, symbolism, of course, there for going up, and a bit like with Moses. And then who would appear? Jesus is transfigured. He is changed. It's told slightly differently in the 3 accounts, but the idea is that basically there is a glimpse for the disciples for a moment of the heavenly being that Jesus is, of God, literally there, revealed not just as a human being in the person of Jesus, but as the divine, transcendent God from on high, is such clumsy language, but you know what I mean. And there on that mountain, 2 Old Testament figures appear. Elijah, which of course to the people who first read this would have known this was a portent of something auspicious. At the end of time, when God comes back and rescues all of creation, Elijah was foretold to return. So Elijah is here, and Moses is here. So we have the teaching of the prophets and we have the teaching of the law combined in this one situation. And Peter's declaration, clumsily made, about building tents for people to stay is because of that old idea that God would come and abide with his people again in a tabernacle, in a tent, in a permanent being, almost in a sense for us to characterize it as trying to capture that mountaintop experience and make it last, to be something permanent, to be a glory. A bit like when we were talking last week about Jesus being in Capernaum and healing many people. He could have set up shop as some kind of healer and always been there on tap. But that's not, again, what the ministry is all about. We're not here to say God is in one particular place and people come. God is with us and with all people. So the voice of God is heard. The disciples are left in no doubt who this person is. And Jesus again says, don't tell anyone about me. It's a journey, as it is with all of us when we encounter God's love in our hearts, or when we first hear about the unconditional, eternal love of God. There is always a tension, and it's very, very strong, for us to try and put God in our world, to try and make sense of this transcendent, all-powerful, eternal God somehow being constrained into our lives and able to be directed, able to be called upon, able to be found in the same place, put in that tent. And that's not the way it is. We always feel that it's so amazing, this experience of God, but if you try and talk about it with other people, there's always going to be a desire for people to say, well, where can I find God? How can I find God? Where can I experience God? And the answer is, well, you can't put God in a box and bring God out when you want God. You can't do a few incantations and magic God up. God is always, always with us. And it's the exact inverse of the rest of our scientific world, where we put something in a particular place and study it, learn more about it. Like if there was some alien invasion and we'd want to put, whatever has landed under observation and find out more about them. It isn't like that with God. God is always in and through us. We've got to remember that our very fabric, our being, our atoms, created by God. God is already within us. Wesley had a strong sense of a theory that he called prevenient grace, which was the idea that inside each person there was already that spark of God just waiting to be lit up, just waiting to be connected with. And there is truth in that from a physical sense. We are born from the dust of the stars. God made us, and God is in us. And it's not that we have to go and quest in a scientific way to find God, to seek those transcendent experiences. They are given to us, just as God's love is. It's not something we can direct or define. And that's the struggle the disciples had, and it's the struggle that all of us have when in our daily lives we feel that we need particular help or support. We cry out to God, where are you to make life better? Where are you to help me in this difficult situation? And that's really not the way it is. I mean, those words can sound quite comforting. If anyone wants to follow me, he must forget self, carry his cross and follow me. But it isn't just forget self and follow me, it's carry his cross. It is bear the burden of unconditional love. It is bear the burden of maybe pain and suffering and distress in your own lives. It isn't all going to be tremendously simple or easy. The demands of following unconditional love are incredibly tough. And though we would love to stay constantly in the presence of the God who embraces us, who warms our hearts, who gives us that deep assurance and peace, and that to be a constant state, that's not going to happen until we get to heaven. That's not going to happen until this life ends and we more fully connect with the God who made us and the God who loves us. In this life, we have a tension of what we say or do. Is it what we want, or is it what God wants? And in every situation, there is a choice. How we spend our time, what we do with our money, what we do with our possessions, how generous we are, how loving we are, how judgmental we are. In every single human encounter, there is a choice. Forget self and follow me, Jesus said. And that means looking at all people everywhere for exactly what they are. God's children, just as much as you and I are, loved, accepted, pardoned, and set free by a strength and a passion and a joy and an assurance that is waiting for each one of us. And in this life, I don't think we'll ever fully get that sense. There are enough glimpses, and when we do meet God face to face, then we'll really know what a tiny percentage of our perception was actually working in this life. Then we'll see that we really did see God through a glass darkly, that God was very veiled. But even so, a bit like the sun that is behind thick clouds, it still illuminates our planet in bright sunshine and light. Even if we can't see it, it's still there, burning so brightly. But our perception of the sun, especially in these darker winter days, is that it's barely there at all. But of course it is. Always. Warming us and literally giving this planet life. And so it is with God. It's glorious when we can see the glory of God in our lives. It's wonderful when we have those heartwarming moments, when we have those moments of transcendence, those mountaintop experiences. But that is not where we're called to stay. Those experiences are to convince us and convict us utterly of the truth we profess, that God came in human form in the person of Jesus, and through his death and resurrection set us free to go and live a life to serve and love others, to come down from the mountaintop, to be with people, and to share that